one of the central practices of the church is to care for the poor and the vulnerable. It is all over the place. You can't escape it.
Sometimes numbers are just like numbers, but those numbers actually affect people. Millions and millions of people.
The church embodies the value of being a family. It's able to provide relationship in a way that the state never can.
You're talking about people who have defended this country and then come back disabled, who need these same benefits. It just seems very unfitting of the person who would say that they follow Jesus, who himself said, "When I was hungry, you fed me."
Yo, we're back with another episode of the Unsilent Church podcast. And I'm here with the crew in the building, James and V. We got an important conversation that we're going to talk about. It's pretty important, pretty essential. V, you want to kind of kick us off?
Yeah, so July 4th, 2025, this was last year, President Trump signed into law the One Big Beautiful Bill. A lot of different things in that bill. But the thing that concerns us today is how that bill cut SNAP. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's our country's largest anti-hunger program. So how people get food stamps, it's probably one thing most people are familiar with, but a lot of other ways in which it supports people. It cut it by $187 billion through 2034.
That's a lot of money, by the way.
Yeah. And so, it reduces benefits, it restructures who pays for the program, who can access it. And the effects are current in terms of what people are experiencing because of that. 3.5 million people lost SNAP between July 2025 and early 2026. One of the sharpest declines that's ever been seen, at least in the last 30 years. 700,000 children lost benefits. There was effect on free school meals. Basically, the entire nutrition safety net was affected by this. Food banks are trying the best to step up to fill that gap. Obviously, doing it because of inflation, food costs are going up, and so you can see some of the strain of that. States now are having to sort of make up the difference, increase their budget by over 200% to maintain current enrollment. But that's a lot to add 200% to your budget to try to make up some of that difference.
And it's the first time in SNAP's 50-year history that states must share in that benefit cost, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
Like that's
But normally they haven't done that. Yeah.
Normally this never happened. So this is the first time. So that 200% that you're talking about, like the states have to figure out how they're going to be able to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so the kind of people affected are lawfully present immigrants, veterans, those who are unhoused, former foster youth. A lot of them had eligibility and no longer don't have it. Those increases in work requirements, which made that obviously harder for some people who are working, now having sort of more requirements put on them in terms of being able to access those benefits. So a lot happened there. And I think what we want to sort of think about in relation to this is, what's the government's role when it comes to providing for the least of these? Some people have argued, so some Christians in particular have argued that, government breeds dependency, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. Sure, it's helpful to have the government, but now finally, this is really where the church should always have been, to step up, care for the least of these, care for those who are endangered. Others would say differently, that the state really does and should play a role in caring for people through benefits like that. Let's sort of toss it to you guys in terms of how you sort of think through this, what happened, and how we deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty devastating in a lot of ways at all those numbers that you just mentioned. I know we talk about numbers a lot sometimes, and sometimes numbers are just like numbers, but those numbers actually affect people, millions and millions of people. So I just want to say, like, this is not something that's just like on a little Excel spreadsheet that you just like, whatever. It's like, no, these are actual people that are made in the image and likeness of God that should be cared for. I understand the conversation about, and I'm sure we'll talk about the role of government and things of that nature, but, just processing and thinking through it. I don't know, man. If the government has a role in disenfranchising a bunch of people, then I think that they should have some type of responsibility of actually trying to make that right.
Well, explain that. So some people, hearing this would be like, how did the government disenfranchise people? What are you talking about?
Man? I mean, do we got how much time do we have?
No, let me say it. Like, what way? I think I know what you're going to say, and then I'll just tell you what I think some people would argue differently. So,
I mean, you want to go crack in the 80s? Do you want to go how the government allowed for crack cocaine to go into disenfranchised communities, black and brown, the inner cities, the hoods, the projects? I mean,
okay.
We could start there. I mean,
Well, some would argue that first of all, that was the 80s. This is 2026. That was a problem that was that's not quite the same as it is today. Now it's other things, right, that are happening. Some would also argue that this sort of sense of like you're responsible for the government didn't force people to take drugs, and sort of self-responsibility, et cetera.
Yeah.
That this is you're blaming the government for problems that people have created for themselves.
That's such
Yeah, I'm the messenger here. I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
You're part of what I'm trying to do here is just give what a counter argument would be.
Yeah, I understand.
I think that's fair. I find I have a hard time with people who make arguments like that, because often those same people would make the argument of the necessity of family and healthy family and all those sorts of things, but then also in the same breath will deny the effects. One, you have the economic determinants of crime, so that's one piece of it, in the way that you legislated like the unfair and unjust practices when it came to lending, where certain families could buy, what they could invest in, the jobs that they could get. And then again, to say that none of that matters, the way that there's disproportionate, some would say targeting, but like the way policing was done in certain neighborhoods, mass incarceration, 3-strike rules, the way people were penalized for nonviolent crimes. People personally who have spent decades in jail for things that they were either not guilty of, or just the punishment didn't fit the misdemeanor or the offense. And then the way that has effects on family and especially, black and brown homes versus white counterparts. And then the generational impacts of that. And so then when you don't have that kind of structure, the dual income that would come from that, the stability that would come from that, you create a situation that's corrosive over generations. And so then when there are people who have advocated for these things, and then the government then puts things into place in order to help these people. And again, it's not just in those circumstances. You're talking about people who have defended this country and then come back disabled, who need these same benefits. You have people who are elders who need these same benefits. You have people who are mentally unwell, dementia, nursing homes, all places where people cannot necessarily fend for themselves, the vulnerable, who just don't have the same kinds of abilities that you do right now in your youth, to make those kind of arguments. It just seems very unfitting of the person who would say that they follow Jesus, who himself said, "When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me." It's hard for me to understand someone who says they are a devout follower of Jesus and then hear something like this happen that cuts the kinds of benefits that take care of the least of these and say, "Oh, that's a good thing," and like with no sense of remorse. Like the government just has a kind of scale that churches don't. And to approve or to be okay with that kind of decision when what's being done with those funds is more violence to create the same kind of issues in other parts of the world. I go like, are we just like, it feels like we're not thinking with the mind of Christ that we're supposed to have.
Yeah.
Like it sounds very, very foolish to me.
Yeah, I think to be clear too, I think there's probably some level of a collaboration of some sort, because the sheer numbers of how many churches there are in America and the money that all the churches brings in, when we think about these benefits that's being cut, they will take it would take a lot of churches to add more money to the annual budget to even bridge this gap. So that's a lot for these churches. So what I'm suggesting is there should be some level of, obviously churches should do something, and some churches are doing things, but the government, because of the history of what has happened to a bunch of people, they should have some role in trying to help bridge that gap as well.
Yeah, I mean, let's give the actual numbers, because I think it really reinforces the fact that, like, if just hypothetically we remove the government entirely and ask churches to fill the gap, to care for the least of these, I think the numbers actually really reinforce this point, what we're really saying. So if you look at private charities, religious organizations, they provide roughly 40 to 50 billion, right? So that's a lot, 40 to 50 billion in food, clothing, shelter assistance.
That is a lot.
But here's the thing. When you look at federal safety net programs, so this is SNAP, but let's include Medicaid and housing assistance there as well. Hundreds of billions. It's close to 1 trillion, right? 1 trillion, right? That's 40 to 50 billion
times more.
30 times more. And SNAP, just by itself, let's just focus on SNAP. That cost roughly 110 billion annually, right? So this is pure math.
And again, annually. This is not a one-time cost. There's
annually. Let's say, estimated 350,000 religious congregations in the United States. Okay. When you think religious congregations, I mean, I've heard numbers of, like, okay, let's say about 100 people is to like thousands of people, right? To mega churches. So they're all in the same pot. Those with thousands of people in their church, those with like only 100 to 200 people in the church. 350,000 of those, if SNAP disappears, every single one of those churches has to raise an additional 314,000 every single year
to bridge that gap.
To care for those families, right? So when people say, "Well, the
that's
church
like an extra
up.
LED wall you gotta raise money for."
Yeah, I mean, some of those churches out there are like, "Oh, that's nothing," right? But like, you're talking every single one of those churches. And mega churches are like, I think, are a small percentage. A lot of people, maybe I think 50% of Americans or something like that go to mega churches. But churches in general, local churches, are way broader than that. So you can't just look to the mega churches to provide for this. 350,000, you're looking for every single one of them to raise 314,000 more. And they got to do it every single year to cover those families. And so this sort of, it's just an interesting thing when people sort of say that. I just want you to realize, like, so you're asking your church to come up with 314,000 every single year. Now, maybe some are still saying that and are doing that, but it's just important to sort of, I think, put that into.
That's on top of what they might already be doing.
On top of what they're already
doing. So let's
doing.
just say a church, hypothetically, is just they're doing $100,000 already. Then it's like, oh, you need to do 314,000 more. Like,
yeah, that 100 needs to turn into almost 5. I just think people create. We had a conversation before about false choices or false dichotomies, and I think people just lose sense of like what it means to, one, be human, and the presence that we're actually supposed to have in the world, and it seems like people just don't understand what it means to be in the image of God, and to have the kind of presence in the world that helps the world understand what God is like. Like, God gives to those, gives to the just, to the unjust. He makes it rain on the good and the evil. He makes the sun shine on everyone. The world is better because God makes it that way. And it seems like those who would say that it's okay for the government to cut these kind of benefits, they would say, like, oh, the church, quote unquote, should take care of it. I'm like, where do you think the church exists? And that's the kind of like foolish thinking, the kind of simple thinking. I'm like, where do you think the church exists? So the church has no presence. The Spirit has no presence. There are no Christians who like serve in these leadership positions in the government. So when we're talking about the government, sometimes it's like, yo, there are Christians who serve in leadership, executive, influential positions when it comes to some of this legislation, when it comes to some of these judgments, when it comes to some of this executive leadership. The call, the sort of advocacy, the sort of like call out, whatever it is, the attention is to say like, hey, people need to be held accountable for the decisions that they're making that are affecting real people, And again, everyone's going to stand in front of that the great white throne and be held account for the decisions that they made. And if you're thinking that you're going to stand before God and say, yeah, I thought it was great that we cut benefits for the least of these. I thought it was great that when I had an opportunity to feed those who were hungry, to provide a way for those who are unclothed to have clothes.
Matthew 25.
If there was a way for me to do that, I thought that it was a great idea to say, no, let's not do that, and instead use that money to buy more weapons. And then to create the kind of like corrosive things that are happening on the other side of the planet in God's name. Like, it's those kind of things that I'm like, do you not understand how the name of the Lord is blasphemed among Gentiles, among the nations, because of the kinds of choices that us in God's name are making?
I think the history here is helpful as well. That, I mean, I like the way you sort of put it. Like, we have Christian people who say they're Christian in leadership, and we would argue that your faith and your values should influence how you lead. And one of the things
And
that
how you
I
govern.
think, and how you govern, how you lead, how you govern, right? And
Yeah,
so,
totally.
and so part of a key part of our faith is the sense of that we always have a special care, attention towards the least of these among us and care for those. But also, just historically speaking, I mean, this is the church, just in general, has always influenced society to think this way. That the idea that like the state or sort of society at large, the government at large, should have care for those who are least among them is a Christian idea. So the church has always been meant to inspire and lead to that. At least historically speaking, that's what's always happened, right?
Because that is what God is like.
So, Dominion by Tom Holland, his early chapters, he sort of does a really good job of explaining how pagan, and he's not the only one, but like one of the more recent ones I've read, how pagan society was like. That the idea that you care for the poor, for beggars, for people who are destitute, for kids, that was a foreign idea. You didn't do that. Women were property, kids were essentially another form of property. You abused people however you wanted them to. Your slaves were there for you to use them and exploit them sexually, physically, however you wanted to. The idea that you care for those who are less than you was just like no one does that. I mean, look at Roman mythology, et cetera. It was very much who's the most powerful, who's the strongest, and that's how you operate. I read an anecdote just recently about it was like a Greek, I think a Greek philosopher. I can't remember exactly what, but he talks. There's some elite dinner party that some Greek elites were having, and a dog walks in holding the hand of a person, and it was sort of and that they're discussing like interesting in this recounting of it. No one asked like, oh, what happened? Like, this is horrible. Like, who died? We need to figure this out. They didn't really care about that. It was just, oh, this party got disrupted, right? Which tells you something. It suggests that like the idea that like you saw body parts or people mishandled, et cetera, was normal. What happens with Christianity? Christianity comes in right in the first century, and we read, Acts 2, Acts 4, read verses like this, right? They were selling the possessions, distributing the proceeds to any and all as any had need. People, and again, voluntarily, but like when we say voluntarily, it wasn't like, well, no one did it. No, voluntarily sort of, I think, shows that like the power of this, that everyone voluntarily was willing to do this. Share what they have, distribute it to help those who needed it, treating everything they had as if was in common. Those who had more would sell what they had to care for those who had least. So the church is doing this, and the result of this had an immediate impact on society. I don't have this book with me right now, as Stephen Presley wrote a book called Cultural Sanctification, and so I'm going to have to sort of off memory here, but he quotes a couple different Roman leaders. I think there's one Roman emperor in particular talking to one of his pagan priests, and mentions like, we got to do something. Like, these Christians are caring for not just their own
better
people,
than we are,
but everyone better than we are. And so you begin to see this shift, and obviously that accelerates when Constantine, the Christian emperor, comes in, et cetera, and institutes these things. But just the idea that a society at large should care for those who are poor and destitute among them is a Christian idea, and one that we've seen throughout history. And so it's just wild to me that we're almost saying we should reverse that, right? That the church, I think, has at its very best always does influence society at large, and this is one of the best examples of it. So we have Christianity has influenced society at large to care for people. That's a good thing. That's not something we should discourage or dismiss. And so it really gets into this, like, it's not to say the church can do everything. The church can't do everything. That's the point. But the church, by almost being like this idea of a light, does then lead to great impact in societies around us. And we should encourage that. We should want to see more of that.
I mean, I think we should. The history obviously bears, gives the history of the church, of being the church and doing what church would do. But also, we can also see that there's still a level of challenge. And so here's what I think that, oh, by the way, too, James, I think the comment you made about when people stand before the throne and all that, I think, I'm just a messenger too. They would have those people. They would have a different
and say what I believed on Jesus and that
reason
that's enough.
of why they would. I think they would have a different perspective.
That's fine.
In terms of what I mean.
Say what you want.
Even though
I would tell them, I'd go, great, but your Bible reads very differently, because your Bible says He separated sheep and goats and said, "What did you do?" So if the response in some way is like, "Oh, that's social stuff. I'm just over here preaching the gospel," I go, "That's fine. You could say whatever makes you feel better, but your Bible is bearing witness against you."
When you say Bible too, you probably got to just clarify which Bible, because there's a Thomas Jefferson Bible, there's a slave Bible. I mean, which Bible? Because sometimes stuff was taken out. Stuff was taken out. You know what I'm saying? And
I
so
agree.
people-
I agree. But this is 2026, and most of the Bibles that you're reading today,
Fair enough.
read in a way that it would probably attest against you.
I mean, taking off what you said there too, I mean, there's an irony here that it's not as if those some who argue against this are saying, well, we don't want the government doing anything, right? Or we don't want any sort of they would argue against, well, the church, what it does in caring for the least of these shouldn't necessarily lead to the government having to do it. But some of those same people will argue, but yeah, the church should influence the government to institute 10 commandments in our schools, to institute school prayer,
to ban books, to rewrite
to
history.
Have, so the irony here isn't, it's interesting. You realize sort of some of the hypocrisy among some as they argue this. They're not against
government involvement
in religious spaces, government instituting religious morality.
Just in certain ways.
Obviously, our friend Caleb Campbell has done a lot of stuff with Christian nationalism, and they're one of the prominent proponents of this. It's remarkable how much Christian nationalists want the government to do things in the name of Christ, right?
Yeah.
And prioritize Christianity, institute all these different things. But when it comes to caring for the poor, the immigrant, et cetera, they're like, well, no, the government shouldn't do that. And so it's, talk about cutting stuff out of your Bible, right? It's, we like this part of it. We want the 10 Commandments put up in our courts, in our schools, et cetera. But some of the heart of the law, which is love God and love others.
We want to ban that part.
No, government should not do anything about that. That's not really the government's responsibility.
Interesting.
And so really it becomes an interesting, you begin to realize it just becomes a question of like, well, what are we really asking for here? What are we really trying to push here?
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things we're trying to say here is, and I think it's worth doing this for those who sort of have question about this. I did this as part of a sermon, and now, someone who cares about this, I was surprised. Like, look up every verse that talks about the poor,
sojourner.
A common formulation in the Bible is the fatherless, the widow, the sojourner, which the immigrant. So as a sort of these are sort of three categories of people who tend to be among the least, but it's meant to capture just in general those who are poor and destitute. Yeah, what does the Bible say about the poor, and particularly our responsibility towards the poor? It is all over the place. God's particular heart for the poor and the vulnerable in our world, and his call for his people to be his instruments to caring for them. God's heart for it, and because of God's heart for it, and eventually when we come to the church, that this is central to one of the central things of the church. One of the central practices of the church is to care for the poor and the vulnerable. It is all over the place. You can't escape it. And so it's very much part of what the church is. The idea that then like the church is sort of this little sort of hermetically sealed bubble, right, that doesn't just influence those around you has never historically been the case. And it shouldn't be the case. Part of us doing good works should lead to good works happening all around the place. And by the way, it begins to point people back to the Lord.
That's right.
Right?
That's good.
One of the ways I think we help people believe in God and know Jesus is through what we do and what we inspire to happen in societies around. It makes people begin to ask the kind of questions that can lead them to the Lord. That's the whole point, isn't it, of what we're trying to do?
Right, right. So I think with all this conversation about SNAP and everything and the history, I mean, we all live in Arizona. I know some of our viewers are in different states and whatnot, but what this means for Arizona is that Arizona will face a significant cost share, likely about 10 to 15%, which means that hundreds of millions of dollars are basically on the line in a lot of ways. And so out of all the states, Arizona is actually one of the 12 states that have data drop on children receiving SNAP benefits, more than 200,000. I think you mentioned that, V. So again, talking about the leasities, and things of that nature. And so what's happening is Congress is considering this farm bill, which basically in the big beautiful bill, it was given to a couple of states or a certain amount of states, not all states, for them to basically have a 2-year delay to figure out what they're going to be doing about the budget. So basically, instead of October, they have 2 years to be able to figure it out. That's kind of the idea, but it only extends to certain states. What is being, a lot of people are kind of saying that this farm bill should extend to all states. So that's kind of the whole big thing about this is why this conversation is really important. And because the 2-year grace period, if you will, the 2-year delay is very, very key for states to be able to figure out this whole cost share versus having to abruptly try to do it. So essentially we should advocate and oppose any farm bill that does not include the cost shift relief for all states, and really just hold the line to our colleagues, and everyone that's in those positions to say, no, this needs to be able to happen. To be fair, I mean, if it happens, I mean, it's still 2 years that we still have to figure out this gap, if you will, but at least it gives some type of temporary relief, if you will, for those that are hurting.
Yeah. So obviously for those who are voters, citizens, that's something to be aware of. I would say too, though, I mean, those are also 2 years where we can continue to advocate and say, hey, maybe new legislation can be passed. That changes this, and that there's other bills that can happen, and hopefully the next couple of times where over these next couple of years that might reconsider the cuts that have been made, sort of a different approach than the one that is currently being taken. This gets into maybe a little bit of just talking about, so what are we really saying here in terms of like, what's the state responsibility? What's the church's responsibility? What's the right mix there?
My stance is, I think it's both and.
Sure.
The Christians, the churches we've seen through history, and even now, our church and other churches that we know around the country and in the city, are doing the work. They're doing the work right now. I think there's some churches that probably should do more, obviously, but that's rock solid in terms of that. Again, like my stance earlier, you can't disenfranchise and hurt a bunch of people from economically, physically, all sorts of things, the family, all types of things like that, and just be like, you know what? Nah, figure it out on your own. I just don't. That doesn't make any sense. And when you look at history too, I mean, I know we've had conversations about reparations and stuff like that. I mean, it's interesting how many people have received reparations in the past. You know what I'm saying? When we think about different slave owners and things of that nature. And so the government has played a role in a bunch of things, but it seems to be when it comes to the least of these, there is a blind eye that sometimes they tend to.
At least recently.
That's where I'm like, I don't buy this whole, nope, church just got to do it. No. You got to come to the front of the congregation because you also you played a hand in it. So you got to be a part of it. So again, what's the mix? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-80? Whatever. I'm just saying it has to be, in my view, some type of collaboration. The government doesn't just get to go scot-free.
I think people just have to remember even our own history as the people of God. Joseph was a government official. Like when there was a famine, Joseph was the one who influenced that they should conserve some, so that they have enough to like do trade and
Yeah.
commerce, and that other people would have some in other nations. Daniel, same thing. Ezra, same thing. This is not a new thing where like God's people are in like government, where however you want to think about government, pagan government in regards to like ancient Near East, or if you think this is a Christian nation, which is not, but whatever you think, Christians have always been involved and influencing the way government behaves. And I think Christians also forget, and again, I don't think Christians are actually, if they're arguing for this kind of behavior, I don't think they're reading their Bibles. Like the parable of the minas, right? For every single servant that came back and took that 3 or that 5 and turned to 10, and when they were told, and all of us are saying, oh, I just want at the end of my life, when I stand in front of that throne, I want to hear a few words. Well done, good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
That is what we're all saying we want to hear. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, right? Where they pull that quote from, the king or the master who comes back, who gave his servants a portion to be responsible for, when they multiplied that, their reward for being good and faithful servants was more responsibility. You know what that responsibility was over? Cities. And so God's going to look at us and look at the things we do with the talent we have, the resources we have. And if he says good and faithful, he will probably give us more. Again, I don't know what the millennia, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it sounds like there's going to be governing. And he's saying, you did good with 10, go and rule 10 cities. Be faithful. And so here again, even in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? The idea that we exist on earth so that the things that we do here reflect in some way what heaven is like, what God is like. What you have done on earth shall have been bound in heaven. There's this idea, well, what we do here and what's happening there are supposed to have some kind of overlap, some kind of alignment. And then we here seem to forget that both past, present, and future, that's been the responsibility. Do the things the way God would do them because we are made in his image. It's not just like this static thing that happens. It affects the decisions we make, the relationships we have, the things we influence, the things we advocate for. And so to think that what the church does versus what the government does is different, as if we don't exist in those spaces. I'm like,
there's always interaction between the two. And I think clearly, I think what we've proven is the state is able to exist at scale, right? I mean, the numbers
far bigger scale.
and obviously the money we're giving for our taxes indicates that state has funds. And we're saying the state is always going to be better at being able to sort of distribute, to reach a lot of different type of people. But the state does have limits, right? And so I think what we're trying to say is maybe it's helpful to think about this in terms of just the values and what churches, I think, at their best embody. The church embodies the value of being a family, right? Mm-hmm. It is a family. It's able to provide relationship in a way that the state never can, right? And so a lot of times the mix we're saying here is like the state can provide funds and the church can often be used, and religious organizations can be used to distribute those funds. So the state can help you get groceries,
infrastructure,
but the church is able to be the one to help sit with you and provide the home and the relationships that you want.
Some of the day-to-day.
Because of the, as you provide the table by which you can have those groceries. Right. Church can help, the state can help fund a clinic, but it can't help you cure the isolation you may feel as you're sitting in that clinic.
Not in every way.
And wondering what their diagnosis is going to be. Mm-hmm. It helps if you have someone from your local church sitting with you in that clinic, that government-run clinic, government-funded clinic, to help you then know what your next step is going to be and provide, again, the relationship and the community that's needed. And so you might imagine that the state is like this big safety net, right, that makes sure that people aren't being lost all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. That people aren't dying in the street so that some dog comes in and dragging your corpse around, right? Back in, like, we're not trying to go back to ancient Rome. What the church can provide is family, right? Family and relationship. And so money is money, right? It matters, but how that money so we're saying, like, let's not ignore the money the state has. Let's use it in the best ways possible.
Absolutely.
And one of the best ways possible is to care for those who are least among them and churches can be at the front line of doing that.
110%.
And so it's a way of just saying like it's not sort of either or.
It's a
It's
both
like
and.
let's use the money that our society has,
Yeah.
and churches lead the way in helping make sure it reaches the people it needs to reach.
Let me say two quick things.
Sure.
One, people often in response will try to speak to a lot of the abuse and the way people try to get over the system, and oh, they don't properly qualify and that's what they're doing and all this sort of thing. Is like, that notwithstanding, we're talking about the sort of gross like cutting of benefits and aid that actually help real people. Like, yes, there might be instances where people take advantage of a system to try and not like take their own responsibility. That's fine. I think you will always have that. But I don't think that necessitates the advocacy to cut benefits that will impact and help far more people who actually do need it.
Yeah.
Right. And then the second thing is about government and the way government provides safety. A lot of people are like, well, the responsibility for the government is to protect us. I was like, well, when you think about protection, you are talking about safety. You're trying to create a safe environment. And when you think about what a safety net is, it's like there are instances where people will find themselves in situations that aren't their fault because of conditions, sometimes because of the government themselves, right? Where they find themselves falling. And it is incumbent on the government because of its scale, because of the tax structure, because of the sort of like social contract that we have made, that they provide a place for people to like land, right? Without being like completely like torn apart.
That's
right?
good.
And to not want that sort of thing, it just feels like an anti-heart. It does not seem like the same heart God has for the people that you're saying don't deserve these benefits.
Speaking of reading the Bible, Amos has a lot of stuff to say about that. Obviously, I mean, stuff from
Isaiah.
I mean, yeah, and so much. The Bible is really helpful.
Read your Bible.
Yeah, read your Bible. It's helpful in these matters. Man, it's been a good conversation. I thank y'all brothers for being able to have this conversation. It is a real issue. I know for some people it doesn't affect anyone. They're fine, whatever. But for some people it affects them a lot. So we want you to, for sure, man, pray. Just pray for God to show up. But also, man, you could do stuff too. You can go to, you can write Congress. You can go. I mean, I had the privilege of going to D.C. Recently, and I was able to speak with Senator Kelly's team and talk about this very thing. So you can actually be active and go. I mean, you could go to D.C., but you can also write and as well, and obviously get out and be able to advocate to oppose any foreign bill that does not extend to all states. So you can do something in this matter, you know what I mean? And by God's grace, there's a lot of work that is going to be needed over the next couple of years to help be able to serve the least of these. So that's what we want to encourage you all to do. With that said, like, share, comment. Love to hear your comments, read your comments in the chat. And as we always say, love God, love people. We are out. Peace.